Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Lazouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we wanted to talk about MDR again and discuss more about certain topic about MDR, which is the classification. So recently we had the MDCG guidance that was issued for the MDR classification. We're waiting for that since a long time because we needed, if I can say, some clarification about classification. And so for that, I have with me somebody that will help us to understand more about this MDCG guidance, to understand more about what are the changes also to the classification within MDR, which is Frank Matzek from BIOTRONIK. So Frank, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Thank you, Moni, for having me.
Great.
And looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, so I'm really happy that you are here because we had a previous discussion about this, and there are really, I think, a lot of good information here that can be really helpful for the manufacturers. So we'll dig really on that. But before that, maybe for the people, so can you just introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Frank Matzek. I'm since '84 in the medical devices space and started from being a biomedical engineer, creating and designing test equipment, and made my way up to the deputy head of a notified body. At that time, it was not called a notified body, but and then joined BIOTRONIK in '92 and made my the first CE mark for an active implantable in March '93 in the golden times where it was rather easy and straightforward to have a CE mark. And then being with BIOTRONIK now for almost 30 years. And since 2016, I'm taking care especially on MDR and representing BIOTRONIK in the German BVMed Industry Association, as well as MedTech Europe. And right. I'm especially on MDR and the regulatory side of this.
Great. I think. I mean, this is impressive CV, if I can say. I suppose you had seen a lot of the things that are happening with this industry since a long time. So I suppose now that this change to MDR is really you are seeing, if I can say, really the differences between MDD, MDR, and what are the impacts to the manufacturers.
Even MedGV. I even had the chance to see the MedGV, the German predecessor of MDD to get to life, and with all the hiccups we had in the beginning, that we had to test devices in the hospitals in use, and that was a fun story. Okay. So we had 2 years to examine all devices in the various hospitals, and that was a stretch. So and then seeing the development of the MDD especially, and then get to life, that was an exciting time because this was real progress. We were moving ahead. We had the chance to get rid of all the national legislation and get a CE mark and being on the market in Europe, in all of Europe, with one regulatory approval. That was exciting time, and I would wish we would have another exciting time with MDR and with the benefits for the industry. Unfortunately, with the benefits, a little bit of problem with MDR. We are seeing a lot of disadvantage.
Yeah, and so
it's not the same time, not the same experience.
Yeah, I understand that. And as we said, so today we'll try to give, if I can say, the good and bad side of the classification for MDR. So first there is really a change between the previous classification under MDD and AIMDD and MDR. So there is really a move there. So is it more stringent for the manufacturer, or it's nearly the same thing? So there is no really a lot of differences here?
I think the extension and the supplements made are necessary to the advancement of technology. For example, to talk about classification of software is something would need to happen. Nanomaterials, I'm not sure, but yeah, that's coming or already there, and other points. But it's the nitty detail which makes it complicated and the interpretation. And I would wish that sometimes we would have more clear and simple decisions rather than being in the very detail and make it complicated.
Yeah, like a decision tree. So you go from one step to the other, and then you have again to go down, which makes things really difficult. And you have really to have experts on that. So we have the MDD and we have the AI MDD. So it's what we had before. And now everything merged to the MDR. So now AI MDD were not classified before, if I can say. They had no rules for classification before because they were under one regulation. Now they go to MDR and they are classified. So does this change a lot to the people that are under this regulation?
Yeah, so we were hoping that the AMD did not have a classification. Everything what was considered regulated under the AMD was a class AMD, which is very similar to class 3. So it was due to the early birth of the AMD. It was the first directive. At that time, we were supposed to have 4 directives for medical devices: active implantables, non-active implantables, non-active and active. So the AMD was the first one. Very small, tiny market, 0.whatever% of the market. And so it was not deemed to be necessary to have a classification. So it's all under one class. And that's similar to class 3. So the discussion about accessories was not as advanced as it was under the MDD a little bit later, 2 years later. So we were hoping when melting everything together, getting EMD, MDD together into the MDR, that we will have classification very similar like MDD for the AMD, that we very well divide accessories which are not implantable, not active, from active implantables. And so we had a hint that there's something in discussion with recital 58. But we were, at that time, we were hoping that this will turn out to be an easygoing, because it's really the active implantables which are meant with recital 58.
So this is, if I can say, the first big change in terms of this classification. There is also another big change, which is the addition of a new class, which is class 1R. So is this also changing all the scope of some manufacturers?
So the point is, it hits manufacturers who were classified as class 1, had no experience with a notified body, and now all of a sudden need a notified body. And so that is a big change. And especially in Germany, we have a lot of small manufacturers making these tools. And they are hit by a new process for them. They have to go to a notified body, have an approval. They don't have a notified body. To find a notified body today is rather a challenge. And if you are a small manufacturer, the notified body making a business decision is unlikely to take you on board. That is what the consequence of that is. I don't challenge the new class, but the consequences of that.
Exactly. So here we want to talk about class 1R. So we have to be careful also, because a lot of people are thinking that reusable means for any class 1 products that are reusable. We are talking specifically about surgical instruments that are reusable.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of people that are making the confusion, and they say my device is class 1R. When we look at that, we say, no, it's not. So it should be just class 1. It's not because it's reusable that it's class 1R. It's just, the confusion here. We had also a big surprise, but something that we knew. It's about the software, as you said before. So software were most likely class 1 under MDD. But now we are going from class 2A, because we had a previous episode with TÜV Süd where we talked about software, and we said that class 1 for software as a medical device is really rare. We have maybe 1 or 2 examples, but it's not like something that is happening a lot. from class 2A then to class 3. So it's a complete flip also. We are also here on the same situation as what we discussed about class 1 to class 1R. It's from class 1 to class 2A to B or 3. So now it's also changing a full industry.
Yeah, and I think the first step, you have to differentiate between software which is driving a device, which is kind of embedded, I would say.
Yeah.
And software as a medical device standalone. That's two things. And then something in between where a device is driven by a piece of software and in addition has a software which is making some kind of diagnosis, taking some parameters from the device, making diagnosis, and then being considered as software as a medical device again. And so the first thing is the differentiation of that. And and then the manufacturers of software are usually not so dedicated to medical devices. They are not used to our sphere of regulatory science, I would say. And that may be a difficulty when going from 2A to 3, or even from 1 to 3, than dealing with a notified body and getting into the details. Yeah.
So is it something that may I mean, we had also a discussion about the qualification of those auditors that will be doing those audits, because many notified bodies were also not qualified to have the people, the auditors that have the knowledge for this. Now they have to hire those people to train them and then to have them available so that they can audit this. So I think there will be maybe some struggle, if I can say, for some manufacturers and notified bodies to discuss the same language at the beginning, because it's not like they have 10 years of experience about the documentation that are needed for that. So do you think this will be also something that we will see on the field?
So I'm not so much concerned about the notified bodies. They had software to review, for example, for active implantables before. So they had experts on that. They were well trained. Maybe they do not have the capacity, but that's not the issue for the notified bodies. So expertise is not the issue, but maybe capacity. On the other side, for startups developing a software, may come as a surprise when they learn about the requirements MDR puts on them, and that may be a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah,
finding a notified body.
Yeah, I imagine that, as we said, so it will be really a big struggle for them when they will see the notified body coming, asking them questions that they never heard about, asking questions for some documents that they never saw or never made, if I can say before, which is something that can happen also. We said that, we have, if I can say, products that we already know under MDD or AI MDD. And now we have the inclusion of some new products, if I can say, or new category of products also on the classification, which we talked just before, which is like, for example, nanoparticles or substances on devices. So when we look now at the MDCG guidance, we are trying to see if this can help us, if I can say, to differentiate some of our products, to say this product is under this rule and it's under this classification, etc. So do you see here, like, on this MDCG guidance, and maybe for also the other products, do you see something that is really helping us now to navigate through this classification and having the right answers to all our questions, to say, yes, my product is class 1 or 2A or 2B or 3? So is this a helpful document?
So it's basically a reiteration of the existing MEDDEV document and classification. So that was always helpful. And it was well used, notified bodies and manufacturers to agree on. Unfortunately, the new one, first of all, it's late. Okay. We would have expected that, let's say, not in 2017, but well before notified bodies start to assess technical documentation for MDR. So before you submit something to the notified body, you should have a clear decision and a safe decision, a reliable decision on the classification. So it is late. I do not disagree with the overall content, but some details, examples which annoy, which surprise people, and where we now find details which change the picture, actually.
Okay.
So, for example, and we didn't know before, and we tried to influence that before, which, because we believe it's a misunderstanding and a mistake, is to classify accessories for active implantables to class 3.
Yeah.
And ignoring that accessories by general rule needs to be classified at its own intended purpose.
Yeah, true.
And there is let's say, a philosophical break, to say that, when classifying and giving examples that certain accessories for active implantables are considered class 3. That is surprising. That is annoying. That is considered an error.
So let's clarify. It's true that when you go to the classification discussion, it says as soon as you have an accessory, it should be classified by its own. So it's a cable, for example. Let's say cable has no energy, whatever, it's class 1. So then there is no kind of discussion here. But if it's a cable that is used for an active implantable medical device, if you go to Rule 8, it says active implantable medical device and their accessories are class 3. So it means that there is 2 rules or 2 requirements that which one to choose then? This is maybe one of the first difficulty we have with this classification.
So there are obviously 2 schools of understanding, I should say. Obviously, the authorities take recital 58 and they say, read there, it says that we should conserve the highest risk class for active implantables.
Okay. Right.
And then they read the text of the MDR and read Rule 8 and see that as active implantables and their accessories should be class 3. So the other school says, wait a minute, recital 58 talks about that an active implantable shall be highest risk class.
Not accessories.
Not a non-active, non-implantable accessory. So wait a minute. This is a little bit odd interpretation. Second, you end up in Rule 8 if you have an implant. So it is the chapter on surgically invasive devices. And Rule 8 is one of the rules talking in the beginning about intended to be implanted or long-term surgery. So you do not get down to the subcategory where you talk about active implantables. Then to see that you have as an example, and there are 3 examples which are causing that issue, that is torque wrenches, that is a screwdriver. It's not implantable. Nobody would have the idea to implant that. It's not active. You're just screwing by hand. So, and it's actually a tool. It's a tool. One could even start to think, is that a medical device or an accessory to a medical device? But let's keep that out of this discussion. The second example is the cable on the programmer, and that is typically an ECG cable.
Okay.
If that is connected to an ECG recorder, it's a class 1 accessory. If it's connected to a programmer and to the ECG module of that programmer, then it's a class 3. And the magnet, which is used to switch the implanted device into the magnet mode, which is even not placed on the skin, but you don't need to place it on the skin. It does not touch the patient actually, which is used if it's used to put metal, remove metal parts from the eye. It's a class 1. If you use it to apply it to an active implantable, it's a class 3. Nobody has the idea to implant that magnet. Nobody has to, it's not considered active. So what is it good for? And then there are 2 more categories. They are wrongly in this rule, and talking about transmitters and programmers, they are dealt with in Rule 9. They shouldn't be examples in Rule 8. So The consequences of this to be class 3 means that you have clinical data in the regulatory file in the tech doc. You need to have a summary of safety and clinical performance, and you need to have a periodic safety update report and all this. This is typically for something which is low volume, low margin, that is economically usually not feasible for a manufacturer. So if you're not able to receive a regulatory approval for that, then probably the devices have to disappear, and with unknown effect to health of the patient or the comfort of the patient, the quality of life, whatever. And the question really is this a wise decision to put these accessories into class 3? We believe it is not sustainable, it's not justified, it's violating the implementing rules, which just state you have to classify the accessories per its intended purpose. And so Note 5 of this Rule 8, which is attached to this Rule 8, says all also non-implantable and non-active accessories to AMDs should be classified as class 3 per Rule 8. This is a violation of the implementing rule. We will never end up in Rule 8 if that is not implantable. So we believe it's a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see that maybe. I mean, we will always see that maybe in future when we'll have maybe some conflicts between manufacturers and notified bodies about that. But I suppose also notified bodies, they have. I mean, they are in the middle of this kind of fight, if I can say. So, do they have something to say, or do they have just to apply without saying anything, or is there a possibility to discuss with them and negotiate for this case, for example?
So the point is, this guidance is published, and the MDR tells notified bodies that they have to consider the guidance, and the designating authorities for notified bodies will urge notified bodies to apply the guidance. The question is when and to what extent and all this, but we expect that notified bodies have no choice after this guidance is published than to apply it. We know that during the development of this guidance, notified body were in agreement with the industry that this should not be a class 3 device, and that's at least what we hear. And it's finally, it has been published this way, and now the notified bodies probably have to apply it, and designating authority will watch out for notified bodies during their assessment that they have applied.
Okay, so
the question really is how can we change that, or how can we tackle that?
Yeah, I imagine that it will be really a big discussion maybe on that. So in terms also of the Rule 8, we have also one product that is in Rule 8 that has been up classified, if I can say, which are the spine implants. So before, spine implants were class 2B, now they become class 3. So is there a reason for that also?
Now, I think I'm not an expert on orthopedics, but what I think is that there is an exemption for wedges, for screws, and these kind of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And manufacturers applying those rules and considering certain devices to be wedges or screws, now finding themselves that hooks, which need a screw and which are connected to a screw typically, are, as an example, class 3. So they kind of feel now that the rule has been applied a little bit different, and that moves their device from 2B to 3. So the difference between 2B and 3 is not that exciting, exactly. Than from 1 to 3. But there are more. There are, for example, Rule 6 for the orthopedic implants, where there is a differentiation between the intended purpose by the manufacturer and the potential risk. and the rule now is considering the potential risk, which is again a little bit odd. Then we are classifying in accordance with the intended purpose as defined by the manufacturer, and not that the guidance is now evaluating the risk of application of that tool and then classifies to the risk. That's a different situation, and this is obviously happening in Rule 6. But again, this is maybe 2AB, 2.3 or whatever. That's not that exciting, a big step.
Exactly. And there is another thing which is also included now, we talk more about substance-based devices. We had also something here about substance-based devices that contains a medicinal substance. So we know that before there was already this rule that anything that contains a medicinal substance is already going directly to class 3 when this medicinal substance is used as an accessory. So what is the change here on all this, what we are talking about here?
Yeah, so the MDD had wordings in there like liable to act. So it was there, and if it had an effect on the body, then in this case, that was a medicinal substance. Now, this is obviously independent of the intended use as defined by the manufacturer. The wording is has ancillary action. And that could mean that something which is a substance-based device is not only in class 21, but is moved to class 14, medicinal substance. And then the issue is that you are sent into a consultation process with the pharmaceutical competent authority. And that is a lengthy process. And to learn now that potentially your device needs a consultation process, which takes quite some time. And we have an overload of pharmaceutical competent authorities since MHRA is no longer there, which made a number of these consultation processes. Now to find a pharmaceutical competent authority taking your file on board and moving through that lengthy process could mean that you won't make it until May 2024, and that is the concern. And we are waiting for another guidance which is on borderline and which will elaborate a little bit more. I think we have a final draft, and this will be then discussed there.
And so mainly here, even if we have a cream that contains a small substance that may be considered as a medicinal product, even if it has nothing to act on the bodies, maybe just for conservation of this cream or whatever, this is moving to class 3, and this is moving to this process that we are talking about. So it's really this situation now. That
seems to be the case. I'm not involved in these discussions, but it seems what I hear and what I understood from the discussion is that this is happening, that manufacturers are sent into the consultation process who were not expecting this.
So it's really true then the MDR is really upscaling, if I can say, moving really higher, tightening the rules and the requirements here with all the examples that we've shown today. So we have more restriction or more requirements for those products and more demand also than from maybe some notified bodies to provide some research on those evaluations. So I suppose this will have, just this change will have a lot of impact on some of the manufacturers.
Yeah. Sure, and again, it's in the detail. Every manufacturer needs to read carefully and make up its mind. Does that change my classification? And again, this guidance is at least 2 years too late.
Yeah,
and that may have effect on manufacturers who were diligently working on establishing their MDR certification. So the early bird may be the one who will be punished because he was trusting, the manufacturer was trusting on the existing classification, his understanding and the discussion, and now finds itself in a situation where the certification is kind of questionable because the classification is no longer hold true. So this is something which is, I would say, unfortunate, to say it mildly. It's unfortunate that the early bird may be punished.
So it's true that if, for example, I have classified my product as class 2A, and now there is this MDCG guidance coming and explaining, no, your product is class 2B, you have already been classified and certified by a notified body under class 2A. So it means that is your certificate still valid? What will be the discussion with notified bodies? Will they up-classify you and ask you more requirements? I mean, as you said, early birds are really punished because they trust the process, but in the end, they are not well classified or they are not following the right rules. So I suppose there will be some consequences to that. But if there is a conflict between manufacturers and notified bodies on that, so is there some process that will try to manage all this?
First of all, I would say there is no dispute, first of all, because the notified body and the manufacturer looking to the guidance find themselves and say, yeah, we obviously have the wrong classification on that. So then the question is how to get out of this situation. If you have switched to MDR, I would say you cannot place devices on the market anymore. And you need to get out of this situation. So that's unsustainable. So probably you will need to talk to your local authority and see what a grace period could be to get into the right classification. So I would hope that the certificate will be valid for another period. And during that period, you can work with your notified body to get into the right classification, the right certificate, and move on. So that if you do not agree, then there is provision in the MDR how you can solve that dispute, and you have to include your local authority, your national authority, competent authority on classification. For example, in Germany, that's BfArM, and you can go to them and bring the case, and they will have a decision and will let you know what they believe is the right thing to do. It's very likely that they will follow the guidance and will not make up a completely new discussion about that classification. So it is expected that the local authority will follow the guidance, but nevertheless, you have that chance to bring the case and get a decision. And then the question is, if the local authority decides against the guidance, then what is going to happen then? Then obviously we have uneven playing field. So in Germany, it's classified this way. In France, it's obviously classified differently because they adhere to the guidance. So then we need a process how to solve that European one.
To harmonize everything, yeah, because I mean, the objective of MDR is also to have an harmonization and to be able to sell the products everywhere in Europe. So if we have some differences between some countries, then we have some of that. So there is a procedure for that, for harmonization, if I can say, or discussion between the competent authorities in case of dispute in terms of classification.
There is one. It's called the Helsinki procedure, very recently republished. And so it's made for authorities to align on this classification issues if they arise, and there are timelines to move forward and remove the unevenness of this playing field with regard to classification.
No, I think it's good.
But the manufacturers are not part of it.
Yeah, exactly. So the point here is just to say that there are some processes from at different stages, if I can say, for talking about classification, to discuss about that. There is also the medical device borderline manual that is also existing, where when there is also sometimes a dispute about certain products, we have a publication about this case on the borderline manual where we say this product is a class 2A or etc. But this borderline manual is still under the MDD. So I don't know if they will be planning to do something on MDR for that.
We're waiting for it, and it's obviously final draft, and it's the borderline between medical device and medicinal product. So it's exactly to this Rule 14, the discussion, and we have a final draft, and we're waiting to have that published soon. That's the twins. The classification, the borderline, that's two documents helping each other, and especially on medicinal, the differentiation between medicinal product and medical device.
No, great. So thank you for that. I think we covered I hope all the questions from the people about classification. So the conclusion is mainly that it's not easy. So be careful on the details, as said Frank.
Mm-hmm.
So there are really a lot of things that you have to consider if you are on the case that we discussed about, the specific products that we discussed about. So please have a look specifically at the MDCG and the discussion, and check again if your classification is still okay, and discuss with your notified body if there is any mitigation plan to put in place so that you can go back to the normal situation. Because as we said, as soon as you are in a non-conformance, normally you have to stop placing the devices on the market. So have an early discussion with them, and no need to hide that, if I can say, because anyway, this will be a problem for you. So have an early discussion with your notified body and try to move forward on that. Frank, is there any other thing that you can say about maybe your work or what you are doing?
Yeah, so the classification guide is a good example for a higher level issue, what is discussed this year quite all over the year. And the question, when does an MDCG guidance apply? And so is there a grace period when to apply that? Is there a way to apply it? Is it fully binding? So you know that it's saying in the preface of each guidance that this is not a binding legal thing. It's an interpretation. But on the other hand, we know that notified bodies have to apply the guidance very quickly. And this causes quite a number of problems. So notified bodies need to train their trainers. The trainers have to train the reviewers on the new guidance. That all takes time. And if manufacturers are surprised by the guidance because they were not aware that something is coming, and not always industry had the chance to comment on guidances. Sometimes some guidances just take forever, others just appear and surprise industry. So if you have vetted your development of a new product, which takes years on a certain assumption, and then you get surprised by guidance, then that could mean that you failed with your investment into this product.
Yeah.
So now the question really is, the MDR requires the notified body to consider guidances. And we had an event in Germany where the Commission representative was stating that you have to view guidances like harmonized standards. That's not the same thing. You cannot compare this. There are distinct differences. However, what I perceive is that we have a little bit of easing of the discussion. So it is not as strict as we were used to, that at day one, every guidance will apply in full. So what we have to work on is a way to have agreement between the authorities, the notified bodies, the manufacturer, that we, for example, have an introduction plan, a transition plan. So if there is something new and you have transition from one to the other, then it should take some time, and you should be allowed to take the time to adjust. And the question really is, what happens if you're already in conformity assessment? We have seen cases where you were already at the certification body, you were at the final review, and all of a sudden the guidance appears.
Exactly.
And you're back on square one. That's impossible. That's waste of money, time, resources. And the same is true if you have a certificate. Now a guidance comes in, and you need to change your product, you need to change your label, you need to change your classification. That could not mean that all of a sudden you're cut off. So we need to agree on something. And what I would be happy for is, as long as safety and performance is not concerned, we should have some time to adapt. So if during a conformity assessment, something, the tech doc review, something appears, we should finish that and have a plan how to move over to the new requirement. If a certificate is issued, we should, and again, if safety and performance is not concerned,
exactly,
we should wait until recertification, or agree on a plan with a certain time frame. So we need something like that. We cannot manage to develop and maintain devices on the market by getting surprised by guidances which jeopardize what we have achieved. That's impossible.
I think this is a good point, because if we don't do that, I suppose that a lot of manufacturers will say, I will wait until really the last moment so that I can move to MDR, because maybe there will be some changes with some guidance, etc. And we should not encourage that, because we saw already that everybody has their certificate that will expire in 2024. So it means that will be really a big wave at that time. So if everybody waits until that moment, because of the argument that the MDCG guidance are not out, so I'm waiting them before I make my moves, this can be a big struggle for everybody here. So it's good to have these.
There are two things. There are two things. One is, if I have an MDR certification, to switch to the MDR, so meaning in the declaration of conformity to switch to MDR, I would encourage people to be very careful in choosing this point in time. If you lost your MDD certificate expire, you have no choice. But if you have a choice, you want to have a strategy to move to a very late stage where you switch over and everything switch over to MDR. The other point is when to submit something to get MDR certification. And there is the point, we will see the rush in 2023, 2024. If you want to avoid this rush, then you better start moving now. Don't wait. Talk to your notified body, exactly, or even find a notified body which takes you on board, and start working on MDR certification. Don't wait. You get into the rush, and then it's pretty likely that you won't make it in May 2024. So don't get forced. I would say work with your notified body now to get a plan in place, assuring that you'll make it until May 2024.
Yeah. No, we had this discussion. So last week with Dr. Roy von Hahn from TÜV Süd, and we discussed specifically about the strategies that even if you are not maybe ready, start to talk with your notified body early so that they can reserve your time for you, so that they can plan everything, because they have also their resources that they have to plan from on the other side. It's why you should not call them at the last minute when you have everything ready. Otherwise, you will maybe miss some of the deadline. So talk to them earlier, have a strategy with them, and this will be going fine then. But I suppose a lot of manufacturers that are listening that maybe are thinking, oh, let's wait until we arrive at the last minute to call them. No, call them early and plan maybe 1 year after your certification, but call them already now so that you have really a good timeline for that. Great. So Frank, really thank you. I think as we said, you are also working a lot with MedTech Europe for all those activities there. If people have questions, I suppose can they reach out to you maybe through the LinkedIn? So I will place this information on the show notes. But really, thank you for all the answers that you provided here, and the clarification also on this MDCG guidance and the struggles that can appear maybe on that. So I hope it will put some kind of highlight on the manufacturers that are on this situation, and then provide them also some solution on what they do. So really, thank you for that, and I wish you a nice day.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.